Right now, in some of the most strategically sensitive waters on Earth, the USS Abraham Lincoln is not simply sailing, it is operating. The Abraham Lincoln is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, one of the most recognizable symbols of American naval power. Commissioned in 1989 and upgraded multiple times over the decades, this ship represents the core doctrine of U.S. forward deployment strategy, deterrence through presence. But presence only works when it is credible. And in recent weeks, the Abraham Lincoln has been conducting high-tempo flight operations that suggest far more than a symbolic patrol. Unlike routine deployments, where carriers maintain moderate operational cycles, port visits, and multinational exercises, this carrier's activity level has drawn attention. Analysts tracking open-source maritime data, satellite imagery, and naval communications patterns have observed sustained flight operations both day and night. That matters, because aircraft carriers are not always running at full operational capacity. When a carrier increases sortie rates, conducts live-fire drills, coordinates electronic warfare rehearsals, and maintains extended combat air patrols, it signals readiness, not relaxation. The Abraham Lincoln is currently embarked with carrier air wing assets that include F divided by a -18 E divided by F Super Hornets for strike and air superiority. EA, 18G Growlers for electronic warfare. E, 2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft. MH, 60 helicopters for anti-submarine and surface operations. Together, these aircraft form what is effectively a deployable air force at sea. A single carrier air wing can project power hundreds of miles inland without requiring access to foreign bases. That is the strategic advantage that makes carriers so central to U.S. doctrine in regions like the Middle East. And right now, that doctrine is being tested. The waters surrounding Iran are among the most militarized maritime corridors in the world. The Strait of Hormuz, only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, is a choke point through which roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes daily. Any disruption here immediately affects global energy markets. For decades, Iran has developed an asymmetric naval strategy built around this geography. Instead of matching U.S. carriers ship for ship, Iran invested in fast attack craft, coastal missile batteries, naval mines, armed drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles. The strategy is simple: overwhelm and harass rather than directly confront. That is why the presence of a U.S. aircraft carrier in the region changes calculations on both sides. When the Abraham Lincoln operates within strike range, it becomes a floating center of deterrence. Its aircraft can strike missile launch sites, naval bases, radar installations, or drone facilities if required. But proximity also creates risk, because when forces operate within visible range of one another, incidents multiply. Recent operational patterns indicate that the Abraham Lincoln has not reduced activity levels. Reports and defense tracking observations suggest increased fighter patrol cycles, extended night operations, simulated strike rehearsals, live missile training exercises, air-to-air refueling drills. These activities are not casual demonstrations. They are readiness maintenance, and readiness shortens response time. When a carrier maintains high alert status, commanders do not need hours to prepare aircraft. Crews remain staged. Weapons are loaded faster. Pilots remain briefed and current. In a crisis scenario, that can mean the difference between reaction and prevention. While the Abraham Lincoln primarily carries Super Hornets, the broader U.S. naval posture in the region has included fifth-generation aircraft deployments. Stealth aircraft operating from carriers represent a significant shift in naval aviation strategy. Unlike legacy fighters, fifth-generation platforms can operate inside contested airspace, conduct deep reconnaissance, jam radar networks, strike high-value targets with precision. When combined with electronic warfare assets like the EA, 18G Growler, the carrier strike group becomes a layered system capable of suppressing enemy defenses before visible escalation. That capability alone explains why movements of the Abraham Lincoln draw global attention. Because carriers are not defensive platforms by design, they are offensive-capable deterrents. The Abraham Lincoln does not operate alone. A carrier strike group includes guided missile destroyers and cruisers equipped with Aegis combat systems, vertical launch systems, VLS, SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors, Tomahawk cruise missiles, a ballistic missile defense capabilities. Each Arleigh Burke-class destroyer can carry approximately 90 to 96 vertical launch cells. Those cells can be configured for air defense, land attack, or anti-submarine warfare. Together, they create a defensive umbrella around the carrier. This umbrella is specifically designed for operations near hostile coastlines. And that is where tension intensifies. In recent years, encounters between U.S. naval vessels and Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, naval units have increased in frequency. These interactions often involve fast attack boats approaching at high speed, drones flying near carrier groups, surveillance vessels shadowing movements, radar tracking incidents. These maneuvers are often classified as unsafe and unprofessional by U.S. commanders. The risk lies not in a deliberate declaration of war, but in miscalculation. If a fast boat crosses too close to a carrier during flight operations, it can force an aborted landing. If a radar locks on too long, it may be interpreted as targeting. If a drone approaches sensitive airspace, it may be engaged. These are split-second decisions, and aircraft carriers amplify those stakes. The USS Abraham Lincoln is not the newest carrier in the fleet, but it is experienced. It has previously operated in the Iraq War, operations against ISIS, Pacific deployments, Middle Eastern deterrence missions. Its crew is seasoned, its systems modernized, its air wing trained for rapid deployment cycles. When this carrier increases tempo, it signals preparedness, not improvisation. And that preparedness creates two possible interpretations. 1. Deterrence posture, show of force to prevent escalation. 2. Prepositioning, readiness for rapid offensive action. Both interpretations can be true at the same time. That duality is what makes carrier operations so strategically powerful and politically sensitive. Beyond military capability, aircraft carriers project psychological power. They are visible, massive, unmistakable. When one operates within reach of a nation's coastline, it forces leaders to calculate response options, missile readiness, air defense posture, naval deployment patterns. It is not just a ship. It is a moving strategic statement. Right now, the Abraham Lincoln operates in a region where energy supply routes are fragile, proxy conflicts continue, drone warfare has increased, maritime harassment incidents have occurred. When multiple armed forces operate in close proximity for extended periods, the margin for error narrows. History shows that wars often begin not from planned invasions, but from misinterpreted signals. A warning shot mistaken for engagement, a drone misidentified, a vessel drifting into exclusion zones. The Abraham Lincoln's presence strengthens deterrence. But deterrence requires constant communication and restraint, and that balance is delicate. So as the USS Abraham Lincoln maintains flight operations, conducts exercises, and sails with its strike group in one of the most contested maritime corridors on Earth, the real question becomes less about capability and more about duration. How long can forces operate this close, this armed, this alert, without something shifting? Because aircraft carriers do not casually remain at peak readiness. They do so when strategic calculation demands it. And right now, the Abraham Lincoln is not reducing its posture. It is sustaining it. In military strategy, positioning is never random. When an aircraft carrier like the USS Abraham Lincoln increases operational tempo near a volatile region, analysts do not just look at where it is. They study what it is doing, how long it is staying, and what other forces are moving around it. Because escalation rarely happens all at once. It builds in layers. Over the past decade, maritime tension in and around the Strait of Hormuz has followed a recognizable cycle. 1. Political friction rises. 2. Naval presence increases. 3. Harassment incidents multiply. 4. Military drills intensify. 5. One incident pushes both sides to the edge. The Abraham Lincoln is currently operating within this cycle. High-tempo flight operations are not inherently aggressive, but sustained high-tempo operations in proximity to a hostile coastline change the atmosphere. When combat air patrols are flying continuously, when electronic warfare aircraft are rehearsing suppression missions, and when destroyers are maintaining layered missile defense coverage, the message is clear. This force is not just present. It is prepared. Preparation alters perception. To understand why the Abraham Lincoln's presence matters, we have to understand Iran's approach to naval warfare. Iran does not attempt to match U.S. carrier strike groups with equivalent fleets. Instead, it invests in swarm tactics using fast attack craft, coastal anti-ship missile batteries, naval mines, armed drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles. This strategy aims to complicate carrier operations rather than defeat them outright. The goal is not to sink a carrier. The goal is to create enough threat density that operating near the coast becomes risky and politically costly. That is why incidents often involve dozens of small boats approaching at high speed, drones flying near strike groups, surveillance vessels shadowing U.S. movements. These tactics create ambiguity. Is a fast-approaching craft conducting reconnaissance or preparing for attack? Commanders must decide in seconds. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most critical maritime choke points on Earth. Approximately 20% of global petroleum shipments transit through this narrow passage daily. At its narrowest, it is roughly 21 nautical miles wide, but shipping lanes are even tighter due to territorial waters. This geography magnifies every movement. A U.S. aircraft carrier operating near this strait monitors maritime traffic, conducts patrols, projects air coverage over shipping lanes, deters potential interference. But it also becomes a focal point. When oil tankers are intercepted or harassed, when commercial vessels issue distress calls, or when naval escorts intervene, global markets respond instantly. This is where naval presence becomes economic influence. The Abraham Lincoln's deployment is not just military. It intersects directly with energy security. There is a crucial military concept at play here: compressed decision cycles. When forces are positioned far away, political leaders have time. When forces are already in theater, armed, fueled, and rehearsed, decisions can be executed rapidly. If an incident escalates, aircraft can launch within minutes. Destroyers can deploy interceptors immediately. Electronic warfare systems can activate instantly. This reduces response time, but it also reduces diplomatic buffer. Because once readiness is maximized, the line between deterrence and action becomes thin. Carrier strike groups rely heavily on Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. These ships, equipped with Aegis combat systems and vertical launch systems, form the outer defensive layer around the carrier. Each destroyer carries roughly 90 to 96 launch cells, capable of firing SM-2 and SM-6 air defense missiles, ballistic missile interceptors, Tomahawk cruise missiles, anti-submarine rockets. In a high-threat environment, destroyers operate in carefully calculated formations to maximize radar coverage and intercept angles. This layered defense structure is specifically designed for drone swarms, cruise missile threats, ballistic missile trajectories, fast attack boat detection. The presence of these destroyers indicates planning for contested conditions, not passive patrol. Drone technology has dramatically changed the risk environment. Unmanned aerial systems can conduct surveillance, test response times, probe radar coverage, deliver munitions. A carrier strike group operating near drone-capable adversaries must maintain constant air defense vigilance. Even a small drone approaching restricted airspace forces a response calculation. Engage too early, and it may escalate diplomatically. Engage too late, and it risks safety. This constant tension drains operational focus. But it also demonstrates why sustained high readiness suggests expectation of possible incidents. Now consider the scenario of additional naval assets entering the region. If another carrier strike group joins the Abraham Lincoln, several things change immediately. 1. Air power doubles. 2. Missile defense layers expand. 3. Strike range increases. 4. Political signaling intensifies. Two carriers operating within strike distance create overwhelming offensive capability. Nearly 150 to 160 aircraft could be available. That level of concentration is rarely accidental. Historically, dual carrier deployments occur when Major contingency operations are possible. Regional deterrence must be reinforced. Escalation risk is assessed as significant. It does not automatically signal war, but it does signal seriousness. Every regional actor watches carrier movements closely. For Iran, missile units adjust readiness. Coastal radar systems track continuously. Naval patrol patterns increase. For Gulf states, air defenses go on alert. Diplomatic channels intensify. Energy infrastructure security tightens. For global markets, oil price volatility increases. Insurance premiums for shipping rise. A carrier deployment ripples outward beyond its deck. Aircraft carriers create psychological gravity. Their visibility and size are intentional. They are not stealth platforms. They are symbols of presence. When operating close to shorelines associated with tension, they create deterrent pressure, political leverage, strategic signaling. But signaling can be misread. One side views readiness as deterrence. The other may view it as preparation. This ambiguity fuels escalation cycles. History shows that wars often begin not with deliberate decisions, but with cascading reactions. A drone flies too close. A radar locks on briefly. A patrol boat maneuvers aggressively. A warning shot is misinterpreted. When forces operate in proximity, the margin for error shrinks. The Abraham Lincoln's sustained operations suggest readiness, not retreat. But readiness requires discipline. Commanders must balance deterrence with restraint. That balance grows more fragile the longer high alert posture is maintained. So the key issue is not whether the United States can dominate militarily in the region. It clearly can. The question is sustainability. How long can carrier strike groups operate in contested waters without incident? How long can adversarial patrols maneuver aggressively without triggering response? How long can political tensions simmer while military assets remain loaded, fueled, and airborne? These are not technical questions. They are strategic endurance questions. The USS Abraham Lincoln is already in position. It is active. It is prepared. It is supported by layered defenses and high-tempo air operations. If reinforcements arrive, deterrence strength increases, but so does intensity. Because when armed forces operate this close for extended periods, something eventually shifts. And whether that shift becomes de-escalation or confrontation depends not only on capability, but on judgment. At this stage, the question is no longer whether the USS Abraham Lincoln is capable. It is. The real question is what happens if a single moment, one radar lock, one drone interception, one fast attack boat miscalculation, forces a decision that cannot be reversed. Because history shows that maritime conflicts rarely begin with declarations. They begin with incidents. Let's walk through a realistic escalation chain. A U.S. destroyer detects multiple fast attack craft approaching at high speed. The craft do not respond to radio warnings. They maneuver aggressively inside a safety perimeter. On the flight deck of the Abraham Lincoln, aircraft are preparing for launch and recovery cycles. During these operations, precision timing is critical. A disruption, even a minor one, can force aborted landings, emergency wave-offs, or unsafe deck conditions. A destroyer commander must make a decision. Issue flares, fire warning shots, lock radar, escalate to defensive engagement. If warning fire is misinterpreted as offensive action, return fire becomes possible. And once weapons are fired, even defensively, escalation accelerates. Iran's coastal defense strategy centers around layered missile coverage. These include short-range anti-ship cruise missiles, land-based mobile launchers, anti-ship ballistic missiles, drone-assisted targeting systems. If U.S. forces respond to a provocation, Iranian missile units could activate. Even a single missile launch forces immediate response. Aegis systems would track and calculate intercept solutions. SM-2 or SM-6 interceptors would be launched. Airborne early warning aircraft would shift to combat coordination mode. Electronic warfare aircraft would attempt jamming. An interception over open water might contain the situation, but debris falling near commercial shipping lanes could cause collateral damage. And global headlines would move instantly. Airspace over the Strait of Hormuz is heavily trafficked by both civilian and military aircraft. Aerial escalation introduces additional danger. If U.S. fighters scramble in response to drone or missile threats, and Iranian aircraft launch in parallel, the margin for navigational error shrinks dramatically. In high-speed intercept scenarios, aircraft close distance rapidly. Radar locks can trigger defensive systems. Pilots operate under compressed timelines. One misjudged maneuver could result in collision or accidental engagement. Naval aviation is highly disciplined, but stress environments test even the best training. The Strait of Hormuz is not only a military corridor, it is an economic artery. If conflict erupts, oil exports would halt or reroute. Energy prices would spike globally. Insurance premiums for shipping would surge. Financial markets would react immediately. Even limited naval engagement could create disproportionate economic consequences. And once economic pressure mounts, political pressure follows. Governments would face internal demands to respond decisively. This is how local incidents evolve into international crises. If reinforcements join the Abraham Lincoln, escalation math changes. Two carrier strike groups operating simultaneously within range of Iranian territory would mean approximately 140 to 160 strike aircraft, expanded electronic warfare capacity, layered missile defense from multiple destroyers, redundant command and control systems. This level of concentration provides overwhelming deterrence, but it also signals readiness for sustained operations. Iran would likely respond with increased missile readiness, expanded drone patrols, more aggressive naval shadowing, public political messaging framing deterrence as resistance. Military postures become locked. De-escalation becomes politically harder. Modern naval conflict does not occur only at sea. Cyber operations would likely precede or accompany physical engagement. Possible actions could include GPS interference, radar disruption attempts, communication jamming, infrastructure cyber targeting. Carrier strike groups are hardened against such threats, but cyber ambiguity adds complexity. If navigation glitches occur, are they technical faults or deliberate interference? In crisis environments, ambiguity itself becomes destabilizing. If an engagement occurred, the first 24 hours would likely involve 1. Defensive missile interceptions, 2. Rapid air patrol expansion, 3. Suppression of coastal radar systems, 4. Precision strikes against launch sites, 5. Maritime traffic rerouting. The goal for U.S. forces would be containment, not invasion, neutralizing immediate threats while preventing wider conflict. But every strike risks retaliation, and retaliation invites further strikes. Escalation curves are difficult to flatten once they begin. Naval doctrine emphasizes rules of engagement designed to prevent unnecessary escalation. Commanders are trained to use graduated response measures, maintain communication channels, avoid unnecessary provocation, document unsafe encounters. But rules operate within human judgment. Fatigue, stress, misinterpretation, these factors influence decisions. The longer forces remain on heightened alert, the greater the cumulative strain. The presence of the USS Abraham Lincoln strengthens deterrence. Its aircraft, missiles, and layered defenses reduce the likelihood that adversaries would attempt deliberate attack. Yet its presence also creates proximity, and proximity increases probability of incident. This is the strategic paradox. Deterrence prevents war, but deterrence positioning increases interaction, and interaction increases risk. Past naval crises illustrate similar patterns. In multiple Cold War encounters, U.S. and Soviet ships maneuvered dangerously close to one another. Air intercepts occurred within meters. Radar locks were interpreted as threats. War did not begin, but it came close. The difference was discipline and communication. Today's environment includes drones, faster missiles, cyber capabilities, and real-time global media. Information spreads instantly. Political leaders have less time to absorb and assess. Ultimately, escalation depends on thresholds. Would an intercepted drone justify retaliation? Would a damaged destroyer demand response? Would a downed aircraft trigger broader strikes? Each side calculates red lines. But red lines are not always public. Misreading them is dangerous. As of this moment, the USS Abraham Lincoln remains operational. Its aircraft launch and recover. Its escorts patrol. Its radar systems scan constantly. The situation remains tense, but contained. Military forces are prepared. Political leaders are cautious. Markets are watching. The presence of the Abraham Lincoln is not a declaration of war. It is a signal that the United States is committed to maintaining maritime security and deterrence in a volatile region. But signals can be interpreted in multiple ways. The real risk is not planned aggression. It is miscalculation. When armed forces operate within sight of one another for extended periods, the probability of friction rises. And friction, not intention, has started many conflicts throughout history. For now, the ships remain on course. The aircraft remain airborne. The missiles remain unfired. And the balance holds. But in contested waters, balance is never permanent.